All right, welcome back. We're still in Chapter 1. We're in the second presentation, and during this presentation, we're going to continue to explore the CNSS model. We're also going to broach into information security management and some project management, which is covered in Chapter 1 of the book. So, having given that kind of overview, let's look at the agenda. And there it is. And again, just what I just talked about, Chapter 1 objectives, some management, some information security management, some project management is what we're going to do. Let's go back to our favorite diagram of all time. It is. And if you remember last lesson, I talked about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Well, let's look at it again and talk about that storage, processing, and transmission and policy education technology piece of this model. So information, when it's inside a computer, it's either being stored, and that's probably going to be on a hard drive or inside your RAM, your random access memory, or it may be in ROM, or it may be on a CD-ROM, but it's stored somewhere. And then when it's processed, it's inside the CPU, and that CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. But it's the computer is actually using its brains to do calculations based on that data. And then you got to transmit it. It could be transmitted inside the computer. It could be transmitted over the internet. But those are the kind of three states that information can be in, and there are different types of attacks that can affect it. Just think for a minute. If you're doing an attack on Amazon, and you're trying to attack their availability, which of those three are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on storage, processing, or transmission? And the answer is you could actually focus on all three in very different ways. But most likely you're going to focus on that transmission, but you could actually do an availability attack based on storage and processing by exhausting whatever resources they have to process information or store information. So that storage, processing, and transmission is going to be important as you're trying to protect information. And we'll go into the policy, education, and technology component of this the next time we see this slide, which won't be very long. Trust me, it's coming back. All right, let's go down and look at our lesson objectives real quick. Look, the top one's in green. We talked about that last class. We covered all of that last class. So this class we're going to focus on the next three, and that is these ideas of leadership and management and security management and project management. And we're going to do it at the very basic level. So management's going to be this idea that we've got some process of achieving objectives using a set of resources. And now if you look at leadership as it applies to this, I've got three different models out there. And of course, no one leader is just purely one of these three. Typically, you're a mix in between. But maybe one of these three may be dominant within a particular leader. And hopefully, you've had enough life experiences to kind of see this. You know, you've got some of those leaders, do as I say. And the most dangerous of those are do as I say that have no idea what they're doing. Right? But that's the theocratic type of leader. You've got democratic types of leaders that sit back, let the group come to consensus, and then agree to execute what the group wants to do, or at least allows them to work through it before making a decision. And then finally, you've got this idea that's based on the premise of do just enough. Make a decision only when you're really forced. Wait, let time gather more information, let time accumulate it, and then focus on what you really need to make a decision on right then and there, because sometimes you get caught making decisions on things where the situation changes, and thus it favors the lazy. Sometimes this laissez-faire approach to leadership. When you look at management within security, or within not only security but really any component, there are kind of two models out there. So here are your two models. One's based on staffing and directing, and another is based on leading. And both of them have a planning component, an organizing component, and a controlling component. But again, what we're trying to do when we're talking about these managerial models is to say, how do you lay things out when you're trying to solve a problem? You got to plan for it. You got to organize and accumulate the resources you need. Come up with a timeline and a Gantt chart and all those sorts of things. Then you either have to get the staffing and direct it or lead it, depending on which of the two models. And then after it's implemented, somebody's got to control it. Somebody hopefully is looking at metrics and going back and figuring out, is this working well or not working well? Kind of a control loop around that entire process. But again, if you look at managerial models, there are two of them out there. Real key differentiation is, are you staffing and directing, or are you leading as you go through? It's a nuanced difference, but those are the two models. This actually looks at one and talks about what you're doing within each of those components. I've chosen the POLC model, the one that focuses on leadership. And it talks about the different components. Now, I could read the slide to you, but you can read the slide just as well. That planning phase with goals and objectives and strategies. And hey, what about customer requirements? You know, what does the customer or the boss really want us to do? We need to figure that out during the planning phase. And how much time do we have to work on this? Then during the organizing phase, we have to take all of that information, get it organized, bring in some people and a team that are going to work on solving this particular problem. During the leading phase, we're going to motivate, lead them, communicate, work on that individual and group behavior so that we achieve the results that we want out of this project. And then we got to control it. What standards we're going to use, which ones we're going to measure. You know the old rule of leadership, and that is that which gets done is that which is measured. If you're not asking questions about it, if you're not out there measuring it, sometimes it is not going to get done. And especially if you have high turnover or a corporate culture that rewards people just kind of doing their own thing. And so, again, that controlling phase puts some boundaries around that, some left and right behavior to make sure that you're getting the right results out. All right, let's look at this a slightly different way. Again, when you're solving problems, one of the things you want to do is recognize and define that problem, gather some facts, make some assumptions, and make sure that you're very clear. What are facts? What are assumptions? Because they're very different things. Develop some different courses of action. You know, as a decision maker, if you come to me and you've only got one course of action, well, I think I'll pick it and fire you. Because if you're bringing it to me as one course of action, why don't you just go ahead and make the decision? Because there's only one option. It's like, would you like to drive or would you like to drive? I don't know. I think I'd like to drive. If there's only one course of action, go ahead and make the decision. So when you're really bringing something forward to your boss, you want to have multiple courses of action. You want to analyze and compare those using some common criteria. And in doing that, make a recommendation or select and implement a particular solution. Now, what I've talked about on this particular slide is exactly what you're going to be doing during your final exam. This is it. Hey, look at that. We did not get past chapter 1 before we were talking about the final exam. The alpha and the omega. It's all here on this slide. You're going to be doing each of these 5 steps on your final project. Pause this video right now. Go and look. It's true. It's true. This is what you're going to do. All right, let's move forward and talk a little bit more about these different models, but this is an important slide because you're going to see it again at the end of the semester. All right, some principles of information security management really follow all of those things that we just talked about. You got to have some planning in place, got to have some policy in place, put some programs, protection, people, and project management. Look at that. They all start with peace, the 6 P's of information security management, all on one tidy slide. We'll talk about these over the next couple of slides, and in fact, to do that, I should really flip it right now. So let's flip the slide. Look at the next slide. Planning. That's one of those P's, right? It happened to be the first one. You want to take that business strategy, nest your IT strategy, you know what a CIO like me does, within that, and then nest your InfoSec strategy within that. So you wait for the boss to say, hey, these are the things that are important to me in areas we're working on. IT goes, I can support that. Here's where IT fits within that. And your CISO, your Computer Information Security Officer, says, I nest within that. Here's where you need to be thinking about risk and security and privacy and how to build it into that particular system. Policy, we're going to spend a whole chapter talking about later on, but there are really three types. Enterprise, you've got a policy that applies to everybody in the organization, something like bring your own device, or it may be, user acceptance. You've got issue-specific things. How do I do very specific things that are tied to a particular program? So just think of smaller scale than enterprise. And then system-specific. How do I do things within a particular operating system or financial system that are constrained within that model? So we've talked about planning. We've talked about policy. Programs address where you've split this up and you've kind of chunked it and said, hey, we're going to talk about bring your own device or endpoint management or continuity of operations. All of those would be examples of different types of programs. Well, I didn't talk about the last three. They're not on this slide. Maybe they're on the next slide. Look, and lo and behold, they are. There we go. Protection. We want to put in some risk management activities that include assessment or control to protect our data and our systems. People are going to be critical. They are the most critical link in information security, and changing their behavior is the most critical link. And then finally, project management. Project management has some proven techniques that have been proven over time. You would do well to follow those techniques. All right, we're at about 12 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video, and we will pick up again looking at project management, not program management, not security management, but project management in our next video. Talk to you later on. Hope everybody's doing well. Hang in there.